Hi everyone to Movie Club Recaps. In today's video, I'm going to explain a movie called Soldier Boy. This film is based on true story of a 6-year-old boy who became a Soviet war hero during World War II. Spoilers ahead. The movie begins in a quiet riverside where Sergei Aleshkov managed to climb up a tree and after reaching the top, brags to his mom and older brother. Suddenly, the peace is disturbed when a plane makes a dive on their direction. Sergei then grabs his slingshot and imagines to hit the plane with pine cones and destroying them. It was actually a dream and Sergei wakes up in the middle of the night when he hears a loud bang on the door. A lady barges in and is relieved to see the young boy alive. She tries to convince Sergei to come with her and act as his son since his mom and older brother were killed along with the partisans. But it was too late. Crowd patrols are on the way to the house. The lady forces Sergei to escape through the window and run. As he runs away, many of the houses in the village are burned down. Sergei gets lost in the dark and misty forest. When morning came, he goes by the river to hydrate and after drinking his fill he hears some men speaking in a foreign language. He runs to the closest tree to take cover just in time for 3 Nazi soldiers making their way down the river. The Germans then starts a fire to cook some food. Meanwhile, Sergei sees a snake above his head but manages to stay quiet until the Nazis leave. Later, Sergei continues to navigate through the forest. It's been days since he last ate and so, when he saw some berries on the ground, he didn't hesitate to eat them. Then explosions blast in the background, surprising the young boy. Later, he starts seeing things and becomes paranoid that someone is lurking behind him. But Sergei stands tall and shouts behind him that he has a rifle of a stick. He continues to move on but exhaustion gets the best of him. The next day, a couple of Russian scouts finds him and brings him to base. Commander Kuznetsov, who's in charge of that side of the front, explains to Sergei that they are on the same side and comforts him. Sergei in response introduces himself and shakes the commander's hand like how a much older person would. Everyone feels for the injured young boy and attends to him, giving him some grub and something to drink. Later, a medic named Katya applies medicine hospital to Sergei's wounds. Each time she rubs some, he winces in pain and so, Katya agrees to draw a tank to distract and please him. When the kid starts asking questions about the front, some of the injured soldier beside him answers him politely. Soon, Kuznetsov goes to the makeshift hospital to see the condition of his men and talk with Sergei. The innocent child shares in detail what he has to go through then starts taking interest on the commander's medals and pistol. After given the chance to hold the commander's pistol, he then shows off the tank on his stomach. Moments later, when the commander is on the way to the front lines, Katya asks the commander's permission if they can let the child stay. She explains that they will all take care of him and besides, with no family to go back to he'll end up in an orphanage. But the commander declines the request, stating that the front lines isn't a place for a child. Some of the soldiers visit Sergei in the makeshift hospital from time to time. On one occasion, they even brought him a binocular and some apples as a present. One evening, Katya shares to her fellow nurse that she can't sleep because she keeps on worrying and thinking that she'll never see Sergei again if they send him away. But she wasn't alone, some of the soldiers feel the same. They all keep on requesting the commander to let the boy stay since many of them grown attached to Sergei and also, he keeps their morale up. But the commander insists the boy should leave and for good reasons. War isn't a place for a child. The next day, the Germans advance but the Russians manage to hold off. After the intense firefight, a soldier awaits to escort the child to the orphanage. Kuznetsov takes a seat and has a hard time breaking the news. Sergei realizes what's up and starts tearing up. The commander then hands the child a wooden pistol and in gratitude, Sergei hugs him tight. The commander couldn't bear to let go of the child and changes his mind. He then asks Sergei if he wanted to be his son. And of course, the child answered yes. That night, the soldiers excitedly gather to plan on how to make Sergei's military uniform. Meanwhile, Sergei dreams of a memory war from the past before the war. The whole family going about their day in a carriage. By morning, the commander wakes Sergei and surprises him with the uniform. Not soon after wearing them, Sergei runs around the camp happily and the soldiers were just as happy to see the enthusiastic kid. But then, planes are seen overhead. The German bombardments kills the mood. The Russian springs into action and takes Sergei into a foxhole in hopes of keeping him safe. After the bombing, the number of wounded increases. Sergei tries to look for the commander and Katya amidst the chaos but since he couldn't find them, he tries to be useful by giving water to the thirsty soldiers. While helping out, one of the soldiers requests Sergei to read a letter since he couldn't see. Sergei couldn't read either and makes up a story about a cow. The blind soldier voices out that he doesn't have a cow but the other injured soldier let him continue and laugh it off. Eventually, other injured soldiers let the young child read their letters as well. Later, Kuznetsov sees Sergei sleeping on Katya's lap. The commander clearly has feelings for the beautiful nurse and tries to confess his feelings but gets tongue-tied. Then Sergei wakes up, prompting the commander to abort the confession mission for another day. The same day, Sergei pretends to shave. 2 soldiers approach him and ask if it was for a date, but Sergei simply replied that soldiers doesn't go to dates. The following day, Sergei asks if his father, the commander, if he has any errands for him. Kuznetsov orders him to deliver the letters to the front lines. Without hesitation, the young boy gets the letters and hands them over to the soldiers, easing the tension. Subsequently, while playing around with his binoculars, he spots a suspicious leg among the hay. He then runs over to the soldiers having a meal to report it. At first, the soldiers didn't believe him, but they decide to check it out anyway. Sergei leads the way and instructs them where to find the enemies. Turns out he was right. There were 2 Krauts hiding by the hay. The Germans tries to fight back, but the Russian overpowers them. During the confrontation, Sergei recovers a radio. Later, Kuznetsov learned of Sergei's achievement from his right-hand man. The commander is even more amazed of the child because Sergei didn't even utter a word about it. When the child enters the room, Kuznetsov excitedly shows Sergei his sealed adoption papers, making the commander his legal father. He then insists that they should share the wonderful news to Katya. Sergei drags his father towards the woods and into the riverbank. But when they arrive, Katya is talking to another man with flowers in her hand. This gave Kuznetsov the wrong idea that she was into another man, when in fact, the man with Katya was actually courting her, but she turned him down. Sergei runs over to Katya, saving her from the awkward moment with the men, and tells her that Kuznetsov is nearby, but when they turned around, the commander was no longer there. Not soon after, another firefight broke out. Sergei tries to be involved in the front lines unnecessarily by delivering bullets. An old soldier tries to convince Sergei to get to safety, but the young child is rather stubborn. And so, the old man gives an order instead, and like a true soldier, Sergei follows the command and heads to safety. When Sergei reaches the commander's dugout, he notices that they were having a hard time communicating to HQ. One of the soldiers notifies the commander that the phone lines might have been cut off. Sergei hears this and follows the line until he gets to a wounded soldier. Despite the danger, Sergei crawls towards the man and asks how to connect the lines. The soldier then teaches the young child before he breathes his last. After successfully connecting the lines, Kuznetsov was able to reach HQ and call for reinforcements. Later that night, an older soldier talks to Sergei about the star constellations in the night sky. Somehow, it leads to a conversation about love. The naive child asks what's love like, and the old man explains that it's like a person is ill when apart from a loved one. The very next day, Sergei runs over to Katya in the makeshift hospital and tells her that the commander is ill and has a head time sleeping. Immediately, Katya runs over to the commander's place to help him. Meanwhile, Sergei slips out. Katya wakes Kuznetsov and asks how he was feeling. Kuznetsov then composes himself, replies that there's nothing wrong with him, and realizes that it was Sergei's little ploy to get them together. After hearing that the commander's fine, Katya storms out, but Kuznetsov goes after her. By the river, the commander finally confesses his love for her and asks her to be Sergei's mother. Katya is over the moon, but before she can say anything, a soldier approaches them and gives the commander a letter, saying they have been dispatched from the base. The following day, all the soldiers leave for their new base along with Sergei. However, on their way, they come across a minefield that blows off some of their vehicles. The commander is hurt while the group's orderly, who Sergei was close with, dies in the explosion. He cries and hugs the commander. They carry the injured ones with them and continue their journey to their new base. When they finally reach the other base, they meet the commander's leader, the general. He too is impressed by the kid's ambition and congratulates the commander for having such a smart kid. The following day, their division is awarded a guard's banner, and so is the boy. He promises to save his country when the general gives him his badge. One night, their base is attacked brutally, and the commander is trapped under the ruins. Sergei cries for his father and tries to save him. He calls the other soldiers, who finally bring the commander out. The next day, Sergei approaches an injured commander. His hands were hurt while trying to save the commander. The kid is now an inseparable part of the team. He doesn't have a family beside them and moves wherever they go in the war. The movie ends as the regiment is seen moving to another base.